I'm just trying to make it all make sense.
More
You
No
podcast.
How's it going, everyone? So I hope you all enjoyed your weekend. I definitely did. And I'm really excited to start off the first full week of podcasts in 2020. And today I've decided to discuss something that I read in the book Superbrain by Deepak Chopra and Rudolph Tanzi. And this has to do with how your mind interfaces and relates with the brain. So I first want to go over how your mind interacts with your brain, and before I begin explaining how the mind and the brain interact, I do want to mention that I've explained the difference between the mind and the brain and how they're connected in a previous podcast. So your mind interacts with your brain in 4 different ways, and Deepak and Rudolph define these 4 ways that your brain and mind interact with metaphorical terminology. So I now want to go over each of the 4, starting with the leader. And what this means is that your mind hands out the day's orders to your brain. Your mind also interacts with your brain through being an inventor, meaning you create new pathways and connections inside your brain that didn't exist yesterday. Your mind can also be considered a teacher for your brain, because your mind trains your brain to learn new skills. And lastly, your mind is the user when interacting with the brain, meaning your mind's responsible for keeping your brain in good working order. And so now that I've gone through the 4 ways that your mind interacts with your brain, I now want to go through the 10 ways that your mind relates to the brain that are discussed in the book. And the first is that the process always involves feedback loops. Second is these feedback loops are adaptable and intelligent. The third is, the dynamics of the brain go in and out of balance, but always favor overall balance, and this is known as homeostasis. And then the fourth is, we use our brain to evolve and develop, guided by our own intentions. Fifth is, self-reflection pushes us into unknown territory, and what this means is that when you take time to reflect on things, you often find enlightenment and new perspective. After that, the 6th is, many diverse areas of the brain are coordinated simultaneously. 7th is, we have the capacity to monitor many levels of awareness, even though our focus is generally confined to one level. And this is something I've also discussed on the podcast in the past surrounding your subconscious mind. Then we reach the 8th, which is, all qualities of the known world, including sight, sound, taste, and smell, are created mysteriously by the interaction between your mind and brain. And then the 9th is the mind is the origin of consciousness, meaning it's not your brain, the organ itself, that creates consciousness, it's your mind in which is connected to it. And an example of this are those who are considered to be in a vegetative state, where they're brain dead. The organ itself is still present, but the mind is not working properly, and therefore they're in this vegetative state. And from here we reach the 10th and final way the mind relates to the brain, and this is that only consciousness can understand consciousness. There is no form of mechanical explanation for consciousness, and therefore without consciousness, there's no way to understand consciousness. Understanding the 4 ways that your mind interacts with your brain, as well as these 10 ways that your mind relates to the brain, will provide you with a better understanding of how your mind and brain work. And if you have a better understanding over your mind, you'll have better control over your mind. And by having better control over your mind, you'll be able to be more present, as well as perform at higher levels. And with that being said, this no doubt assists in crafting a life of significance.
I'm just trying to make it all make sense.
More
You
No
podcast.